GG! Converted man here. Okay, so the question atheists can't answer. Been answered in text several times, but so far the guy hasn't made a video saying, hey, my question got an answer. So, yeah. Anyways, Bionic already covered this, but it's just, I wanted to talk a little bit about it, not make a full video or anything, so... In this video, the guy asks, why is anything wrong in your worldview? Of course, Bionic has already pointed out that atheism is not in and of itself a worldview. It could be part of a worldview, but atheism is not a worldview. In fact, I'd say that theism really isn't a worldview. It's part of a worldview. Just believing in God doesn't inform you of anything else about the world. So even just being a theist isn't really a worldview. Being a Christian, yeah, that could be a worldview. But anyways, it doesn't matter. He doesn't want to hear that. He wants an answer to this question. Well, the answer is that, at least for me, and I don't know what my worldview is precisely, I'm still trying to figure that out, is that there are certain things that are wrong by nature of how the system works. So in maths, for example, you have a unit and another unit, and when you add those units together, you get a larger unit. This is how the system functions. It cannot not function that way. It is an axiom. It's a tautology. It must work that way. It cannot not work that. It's just that's how it is. So 1 plus 1 is always 2. It can't be anything but 2. And so it would be wrong to say that it's anything other than what it actually is. There you go. There's one thing that I can point to and say, that's a thing that's wrong. But I'm guessing he's not really interested in that sort of wrong. He's probably going for a moral wrong. Okay, well, my morals are based on my ethics. My ethics are utilitarian. And utilitarian ethics is do the least harm to the least amount and the most good for the most amount. So whatever it is that I do will be aimed at trying to accomplish that goal. Now, whether or not I actually achieve that goal, who knows? I'm going to try my best, but I have limited information. So, of course, it's not going to necessarily get to that goal. So if I think that doing X will cause a very little amount of harm, but it turns out it actually didn't. Well, I was moral in that sense because I did what my ethics required of me. It turned out differently. That's how life is. Are the morals subjective or objective? They might be both, or certain ones might be objective and others might be subjective. It just depends upon how you look at it. One analogy I've given regarding morality is that it's akin to the laws of the land. We have the rules of the law and then the spirit of the law. So the rule is don't go through a red light, but the spirit of the law is, well, there's times when going through the red light is permissible or acceptable. Maybe you went through it just a mere second after it turned, or a couple seconds after it turned, or something like that. And so the judge will forgive you of that. Maybe you have a perfect driving record and you can have it dismissed on that, or things like this. So depending on the situation, there are things that change the written rule. So it is both objective and subjective. That might be one way to look at it. But certain things are wrong because they lead to an outcome that is not desirable by the individual and or the group as a whole. That when you play out the scenario, you will get a society that will not last in terms of how long it's around. And so that's not a desirable outcome because the society will fail and the people will split, and that will be the end of that experiment. So a society that, like ours, for example, in the United States, where something like abortion is legal, and we don't like that this is something that has to be allowed, perhaps. But we know that the outcome is better for society as a whole, because by allowing this, there's less unwanted people, less crime, and less problems. Now, if we had an alternative to abortion, say that there was some scientific way to just prevent birth in the first place, then it would be, I think, mandated that people do that. And if they didn't do that, then they would have to take care of the baby no matter what, because they didn't do the thing that would have prevented it, or something like that. Or maybe there's a scientific way to transfer the fetus out of there without hurting the mother or the fetus, and then we'd have an alternative to abortion. But we don't have those things yet, so we have to go with what harms the least amount of people, which is one person, in comparison to the rest of the population, which will benefit from that person not existing. Seems harsh. It is harsh, but that's what the data says, so that's what we go with. Other things, like you might say, well, what about the death penalty? Well, there we have the problem that one out of whatever it was, last I heard, I think it was 12, but don't quote me on that, because people is innocent. So the fact that we could potentially end an innocent life is a good reason to not have this. Another good reason is money. That it actually costs more to have people on death row than it does to just have them in prison for life, due to various factors involved. There's also the question of, is that justice? What good does it do to take away somebody's life, no matter what they've done? That doesn't undo what they've done. How is that rewarding or satisfying to anyone else? And what sort of person or society are we when we want to see somebody killed because they did whatever it is that they did? I think that says something about us. I want that person to die. Well, that makes me a bad person, doesn't it? So these are sort of philosophies that I have, but they're nothing to do with my non-belief in God or my skepticism per se. I'm a skeptic, and that's separate from any ideas I might have about right or wrong. I think that good is good because the definition of good is, I view it as a tautology. It is really good to do good. So do good regardless of if you want to do it, like doing it, or are happy doing it. Just do it because it is indeed good to do it, and do it without a hope of reward or fear of punishment. And in fact, doing good, not thinking that you're going to get a reward, might be more virtuous than doing good because you believe you're going to get a reward. So if you're doing good because you fear God, then that's less virtuous than doing good just because, and you have no fear of any God. You're just doing what's good because it's good to do it. But yeah, I don't know if there's a official ranking system for such things or anything like that. I don't like these questions that theists or atheists or whatever can't answer, because there's plenty of questions that cannot be answered by anybody. And I posted one as a comment that I usually posit for the theist: what is God made out of? They can't answer this question. There isn't an answer to that, not in theology. The best answer they can give is God's made out of God, which, what does that even mean? Because the Bible doesn't tell you. I don't know, maybe some other holy book tells you what a God is made out of, but the Bible doesn't. So at least Christians can't answer it. Maybe some other theology can. Well, Judaism wouldn't be able to, and neither would Islam, but maybe some other one would. I don't know. What's God made out of? There you go. It's a question you can't answer. Or I could say, what's the nature of reality? You could say God as an answer, I suppose, but how do you know that? You guess. So there's your question answered. Of course, whether or not he accepts that as an answer, anybody's guess. Okay, let's see. I've got a guy in the chat room, Fred Gwenny. I can't pronounce names. Let's see what Fred has to say here. Here's a question for you. Since you lack belief in God as the absolute, that is the origin of all things that begin, what is it that is absolute, and what basis do you believe it? Huh? Okay, let me try to unpackage that. So, God as the absolute with a capital A. I'm not sure what you mean by that. I don't believe in God. What? Well, depends. What do you mean by God? I guess would be a question. Um, I suppose your question contains the premise that God is some sort of absolute, whatever that means, and putting that aside, because I'm not really sure what you mean by that. The origin of all things that begin, what is it that is absolute? I'm not, again, it depends what you mean. I'm guessing the absolute objective, or you mean objective? What is the origin of all things that begin? I'm not sure what you're asking there. Like, what made the universe, or like what makes the physics of the universe go, or I mean, what exactly are you asking there? I'm not really clear about it. What basis do you believe uh, in what, the absolutes or something like this? Like, what are you talking about? Like, I was talking about axioms. Axiom and tautology are both things that essentially an axiom has to be true. It can't not be true. It's just something that's stated as being true because it can't not be true. Tautology is similar to that in that it's sort of it's true within itself. And both of these are philosophical sort of things, logical sort of things that I don't really want to get too much into. But those things have to be correct in order to move on from there. Also, what is it that secures that there are some things that don't change? Otherwise, if everything is changing, then you wouldn't have a basis to assert anything at all. Well, everything is changing. Not everything is changing. Many things do change. As far as biological evolution, obviously, life is changing slowly throughout time. The world is slowly decaying. The universe is slowly decaying. So, in that sense, things are changing. I suppose molecules are moving around, so that's a sort of change. uh, but just because there's change doesn't mean that there won't be certain things that will always be the same way. 1+1 will still be 2, and that's just the way it's going to be. Now, we could arbitrarily decide that that wasn't the case, but we'd have to have a system that's coherent in order to do math. Otherwise, we couldn't do it. So we would still have to have some sort of system that was coherent, even if we decided to change the system. So there are certain systems that will always be the same, and then there's certain things that will change, or our understanding of X, whatever X might be, would change. Maybe we learn more about it. So of course we're going to have to update our ideas based on the new thing that we learned. It's like, oh, let's say tomorrow that we digged down far enough on the moon and we discover, well, the rest of it is cheese. Well, that would screw a lot of science up. We'd have to change a lot of things because of that. But we would incorporate it into our new understanding. We'd change and update things to fit that new knowledge. We wouldn't say that, well, we'd have to go back and say, well, how did we get this so wrong? What went wrong, and how did we go so wrong? And so it wouldn't be like we erased it and pretended that we were never wrong. We'd say, well, we were wrong, and let's figure out why, so we don't make that mistake again. And so, yeah, things would change because of that. But that doesn't, just because some things change doesn't mean that everything changes. And just because some things don't change doesn't mean that nothing changes either. It's a little bit of both. You don't have to have just one or the other. Let's see. What secures that some things don't change. Otherwise, you have no foundation for assertions. Everything is changing. The assertions mean. I didn't say that everything is changing. I said some things change. What is it that doesn't change and is foundational to any of your assertions? There's a lot of things that don't change, like mathematics wouldn't change, the base system of how that functions. Again, we could replace the plus sign with any arbitrary symbol. We could replace the multiplication, the division, etc. But they would still equal the same thing in the end. You know, you don't have to, you can call it, instead of one, you say uno, you can say ich, you can, you know, whatever label you want, it's still a unit, and it still references a concept, and it still represents a system that has to be written in stone, as it were. It has to be coherent within itself. And certain rules of logic also might be that way, in that they could never not be what they are. Although there's debates about that. I favor most of classical logic, so I'm fine with how things are as far as that goes. But what makes them that way, they can't not be that way. Basically, math has to be what math is for it to function. And if we changed it, we would have to change it to something that's coherent and still worked, and it would wind up being math just with new labels. Simply talking around it, I answered your question. What is it that is not changing? Absolute. Otherwise, mathematics is abstractional. Yes, math. Well, I don't know. Well, yeah, math, I suppose, is an abstract concept. So are numbers, so are letters and musical notes, for that matter. There's many things that are abstract, but that doesn't mean that they're not based in some sort of system that's coherent. What is it that does not change? I just gave you an example. Mathematics wouldn't change. So that's one example that I can give you straight off the top of my head. There's other things that you know might not change, depending on what you mean by change. Einstein laughed at those who equated math with the external world. Well, that's nice. I don't care. Appeal to authority. So, and yeah, I mean, you know, numbers. You know, you do often have people compare, say, apples to the number one. There's one apple, there's two apples, but of course that doesn't work with negative numbers. So it works better in money. He's like, okay, here's $10. Well, I owe you $10, so I have negative $10. You know, you can't have negative 10 apples, but you know, this is what we do with it. I answered your question, so I don't know what else you want there, Fred. If you want to come in and talk to me out loud, certainly welcome to do so. I can put the link here. But as far as the question that atheists can't answer, answered that. I'll see if Fred wants to talk to me out loud or not. He's saying I didn't answer his question. I answered it. There are things that change and things that don't change. So one thing that doesn't change would be mathematics. And some principles of logic might not change either. One there isn't an answer to that. Here we go. Can you you gotta pause the other window there. God.
Yeah, you need to remove the link, otherwise trolls will come in.
Yeah, well, I've had that. I'll do that now. Okay, well, hello, Fred. Welcome to my channel. I've never seen you here, so welcome to the thing that I do.
Okay, I'm still waiting for an answer. What is it that is absolute, that secures assertions that you make, since you lack belief in God?
Well, what is belief? What
God,
is
by definition? So I'm a Christian. God, by definition, would be that absolute that secures that certain things do not change. Since you lack belief in God, what is it that is absolute that secures that some things don't change?
Well, first I want to preface all this by saying that because I used to be a Christian, I know that it's God is a thing that people hold dear, and that anything I say about God or beliefs is not about you, but about the ideas. I don't want to attack you, the person. I'll attack the ideas. Secondly, I would say that now that I'm a skeptic, I don't believe in the supernatural or anything like that. You name it, I probably don't believe it unless it's been scientifically proven.
Why do you lack belief in God?
Well, in the particular God of Christianity that I deconverted from, I looked at the archaeology and found that there was nothing to support it, so that was the end of it for me. But as far as other gods, I haven't seen any reason to think that those exist either. There's no empirical evidence, repeatable tests, and/or valid and sound arguments for any God claim that I've seen.
Your position that there's no evidence for God?
There's no empirical evidence, repeatable test, and/or logically sound.
Tell me, okay, so can you tell me what is the causal origin then of everything that begins if it's not God?
We don't know.
If you don't know, can you tell me how you ruled God out?
Well, the particular God of Christianity was
I didn't mention the God of Christianity.
Okay, well, I can answer that one for certainty. The other ones I have a question mark.
Can you tell me how you ruled God out?
God in the Christian view would be negated.
I'm not talking about God in the Christian view.
Okay, well, then I don't know what you're talking about then.
Yeah, you're an atheist, right?
I'm a skeptic.
Okay, do you lack belief in all gods?
Well, as far as every God that's been presented thus far to me, I don't see any sufficient reason to believe that they're even a thing yet.
Okay, so you've ruled out that everything that exists, the sun, the moon, the stars, and rabbits, have their causal origin in a creator God. You've ruled that out?
I see no reason to think that that's true.
Have you ruled that out?
Given that there's no evidence for it, I do not believe that it is true.
If you say there's no evidence for it, then you've ruled out that a creator God is the causal origin.
No, there's always a possibility that evidence will come forth or that somebody will present it.
There's no evidence for it. Evidence entails that there are causal relations and connections. So does everything that begins to exist have a causal origin in relation to a creator God or not?
We don't know.
Okay, so then you can't say that the sun, the moon, and the stars are not evidence for God.
No, I can, because I don't need to know what the answer is to know what the answer is.
If it's not evidence for God, then you're ruling out God as the origin of those things.
Well, you haven't even shown that God is a thing in the first place. That's the problem.
I didn't assert to you that God existed. What I asked.
Okay. Well, then there's no reason to consider it as a possibility then.
So, you have.
It's like this. Here, let me explain. Let me give you.
I'm trying to have a conversation here. You keep on over talking me. Now,
let me give you.
State that there's no evidence for God, which means you have ruled out that everything in your observation does not have a causal relation to God.
No, that has no association causation to
evidence
there being a God.
Evidence entails causal relations and connections.
Not necessarily.
You can't have evidence without causal relations and connections.
Not sure about that, but you might be right.
Listen, if a handgun has no causal relation or connection to a homicide, then it's not evidence of a homicide. I'm not talking about that you think there's a relation. All I'm simply saying to you is when you state that there's no evidence for God, you're stipulating that the sun, the moon, the stars do not have a causal relation or origin in God. Okay.
Yeah. Well, you haven't shown or provided that there is a thing that we would name God yet. So
no, I didn't assert anything of the kind to you.
Right. So there's no reason to believe that there is a thing.
I'm simply examining.
Right. Here's the analogy I wanted to give that you're not.
Can you, since you have ruled God out, is that correct?
No one has demonstrated that God's even a thing to rule out.
Have you ruled God out as being the causal origin of everything?
I don't even know what you mean by God, but as far as there being any reason to think that there's a okay, look, here's the answer to the question because it's a loaded question. There is no way to rule it out as it has not been demonstrated to even be a thing yet.
Okay. When you say, when we talk about God being a personal absolute, which is the causal origin of everything that begins, if I said to you, is the moon evidence for God, what would you say?
Gravity.
No, I mean, I'm talking about in the ultimate origin.
Gravity.
What is the ultimate origin of everything that begins?
We don't know.
Since you don't know what the origin of the moon is, how did you rule God out?
Because you haven't demonstrated that God's even a thing yet.
I didn't assert to you anything.
Okay, you have your answer. I gave you the. Okay, here's the analogy, and let me give this here.
Dude, you're over talking me. I'm being very polite to you, and you're being rude to me. Now,
well, I'm trying to give you an analogy so you understand.
I know that, but can we have a conversation here instead of you just running roughshod and over talking me? Now
you need to hear this analogy so you understand the problem.
You know what? You keep on over talking me. Okay. Can we have an adult to an adult conversation here? Now,
well, I'm gonna match your assertions with critical questions. And
you told me that the moon is not evidence for God. That is that the moon does not have a causal relation with God.
That's correct.
Okay. How did you rule God out?
Yeah, nobody has demonstrated that God's even a thing yet.
That's not an answer to my question.
Absolutely is.
No, it is not. Okay.
It's like if I asked you, how did you rule out that leprechauns are not a causal agent of the moon?
How would I rule that out?
Mm-hmm.
Well, because I hold to the Christian worldview and the authority of the revelation of God, that's how I would rule it out. However, you told me the moon does not have its causal origin in God.
So do leprechauns exist?
Listen to me. Listen.
Do leprechauns exist?
You invited me into the room. Okay. Every time I try to speak, you keep on over talking me.
Well, you have I've given you an awful lot of time to talk here. I still haven't given you my analogy. I want to give my analogy here so you understand.
I'd like to speak without you rudely over talking me.
Oh.
Now, this is the way you avoid my question. By talking me, and then
I answered your question.
No, you haven't.
Okay, I'm gonna pause you because you're not understanding the
Here's
answer.
the question: since God is not stand in causal relation to the moon, your position is God does not stand in a causal relation to the moon as the causal origin of everything that begins, including the moon. So you have ruled God out as having a causal relation to the moon. Is that not correct?
I don't even know what you mean by God, but as far as
the game that's the game you're going to play is
sure.
That you segue. Okay, God would be the personal absolute.
How do you know that?
I'm giving you a definition.
Okay, but how do you know that definition is true?
Okay, I'm giving you an operational definition.
But how do you know the definition is true?
I didn't say it was true.
Okay, then we're done.
Definition. Now
I get to give my analogy because I haven't done it yet.
Listen, dude.
You're gonna go on pause so I can give my analogy because
well, then I'll just leave the room. If you're just
okay, go ahead. All right. So the analogy that I wanted to give was if my door opens, he left, quit. As not surprising to anybody. If my door opens on its own, and I don't know why my door opened. And to then say, well, it must be a ghost. And then to turn around and say, well, how do you rule out that it wasn't a ghost as a causal agent that opened my door? Is shifting the burden of proof. You haven't even demonstrated that a ghost is a thing that could open a door in the first place. So, of course, I'm not going to think that a ghost opened the door. Is it ruled out? Well, I guess in a technical sense it's ruled out because no one's ruled it in as a thing in the first place. So that's your answer there. Now, if you want to come in, now that I've given my analogy that you wouldn't let me give, and that's the answer to your question, then you're welcome to do so. But if you want to keep talking for a long time and then thinking I'm over talking you when I'm answering your question, then you're welcome to do so. If not, goodbye and good riddance. You have no evidence, no test, no valid and sound argument for your idea of God. Therefore, we must be skeptical of its existence. As far as why the Christian God doesn't exist, that one I can say for certain. There's no evidence for it, not even a little. So other gods, maybe you could offer something there. You know, this idea God's this causal agent. How do you know that? How did you rule that in? Not rule it out. How did you rule it in the first place? So he got upset because, apparently I'm talking over him, whatever, and I wanted to get my point across. He didn't want to hear that because he didn't want to debate. He just wanted to assert and do the typical apologetics. So yeah, maybe you can find a different channel that will let you talk without ever responding, but that's not here. So welcome to the internet where religion comes to die. All right, so the atheist question that couldn't be answered was answered. To recap, Fred had no answer, no empirical evidence, no repeatable test, no valid and sound argument, and couldn't present that God was a thing, and continued to ask how it was ruled out, even though he couldn't say what God was. So, shifting burden of proof. How Chad asks, how can you deny Christian God over other gods? So the Christian God I researched. Other gods I haven't done any research on. Let's just be honest. The Christian God, because I was a Christian, is one that I looked into for the archaeology. The archaeology about the New and Old Testament resulted in null result. There was nothing there. There was a handful of locations and kings that I could confirm using archaeology, but there was far more bad, false archaeology done, claims that were unfounded being made by Christian outlets, and things of that nature. You don't make up stories when you have the truth. And it wasn't that, well, this one Christian archaeology group made this false claim, therefore it's all fake. It was that any claim that could have supported the history of the Bible was not true. And the very few things that happened to align were not remarkable. So for those reasons, I could not continue to think that Christianity got it right, or Judaism for that matter. And of course, Islam would go along with that, since that's based on the other two. So that was the end of it for that God. Now, because at the time I believed there was only one God, when I stopped believing God, that was the end of it. There wasn't any other gods to pick from. It's just I didn't believe in any other gods, so once I stopped believing the one God, that was it. And nobody has presented me with empirical evidence, a repeatable test, or a valid and sound argument for God at all. Whatever God is, whatever they want to define it as. Here, God was defined in this abstract way of being the thing that causes things to be, or whatever. And the definition is not being shown to be coherent. So why should I think it's a thing other than just a definition? No answer. So I can't believe in something unless you show it's a thing in the first place. I was hoping for the peanut butter argument, but this was entertaining too. I'm not sure what the peanut butter argument is, to be honest with you. Oh, are you referring, Jan? Are you referring to that if you mix up peanut butter enough, you should have everything required for life? Is that the? I don't think that Fred was going to go down that route. I mean, he seems to know a little bit about apologetics, but unfortunately, he didn't like that I wasn't going to give him endless room to just talk. So, hopefully, I'm glad that I think I answered the question that atheists could not answer originally, and I'm pretty sure that I answered other questions, but I'll go ahead and I'll just put the link to the thing in the thing, and people can come in again if you want. If anyone else wants to talk to me, and if not, within a couple minutes, they'll call this a wrap. It was interesting to talk to Fred. I would welcome him to come back anytime that he wants to give us equal time. If he would want to debate, that might be better than just trying to have an adult conversation, whatever that is. Come on. You mean a one-sided conversation where you say spend 12 minutes saying whatever and I don't get to say anything back? No, I don't think so. Yeah, exactly. The web expert saying that Fred was saying nothing about God. That Fred was saying that whatever God is the thing that is the thing that made the thing that I'm trying to explain. So how do you rule that out? Well, that's not how it works. It's not that it's ruled out per se, although on a technical level, I suppose you could say that. It's that there's no evidence that it's even there in the first place. So, look, it could be leprechauns. It could be. I don't know. I don't think it is because I don't have any evidence that that leprechauns are even a thing. That's why I tried to ask him if he believed in leprechauns, and his answer was no. My worldview is Christianity. Oh, okay. So the answer to why you don't believe that leprechauns are not real is because it's not in the Bible. Okay, I mean that would be a valid conclusion to that set of scenario. Anon. Hi, have you talked about the question on how the universe was formed or came to be? I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not a cosmologist. I'm not a cosmologist. I'm an amateur logistician. So I can answer questions about logic, but as far as I understand the science, we don't know how the universe like came to be, or even if that's like a thing. Like it might have always been because time stops existing and then there isn't a before, so there isn't a time when the universe didn't exist. Whatever that means, I don't understand it. I don't pretend to understand it. But as far as I do understand it, we get to a point like the T1 point where before that point physics stops working and we can't figure out what's going on. And so we have this unresolved question. That doesn't mean we'll never know. It just means that right now we don't know. Daily reminder, you're all brainless and atheism has the burden of proof. Okay. Good argument there. All right, solid knockdown argument. Well, I guess I have to convert to lobsterism now. So for those of you who aren't aware of the true and only religion, it's lobsterism. Now, I know many of you have never heard of lobsterism. Well, that's no excuse. You see, the lobsterist is the only true Bible, and it says that in the book. So if you haven't read the lobsterist, well, you're the ones that are going to suffer for all eternity because you haven't read the book. Now, I know that doesn't seem fair, but that's the system that the lobster original deity set up for all of us. And it doesn't have to be fair because it wasn't about humans. It was always about lobsters. So if you want to read The Lobsterist, I'll give you the link for that book. And if not, I guess you could just remain ignorant because you have the burden of proof to show that The Lobsterist is a false book. Anon, why aren't you hanging out on 4chan if you're anonymous there? It's messing around. My question is, if there was nothing that turned into okay, what do you mean by nothing? Because I don't even know that nothing is a thing in the first place. As far as the philosophical concept of there not being anything, like I don't know that that's even a state that's possible. But let's say that it is. Let's say that the philosophical nothing, meaning there's no rules, there's no physics, there's no anything. There's literally nothing there. There's just an absence of all things. That also means an absence of logic, because logic would be a thing. So then there is nothing to prevent something to just pop into existence from that nothing, because there's no rules. So the answer would be that there's nothing literally to prevent something from coming from nothing, since there are no rules. And the moment that you say, but that's not fair. No, well, you can't assign a rule to nothing. Otherwise there's a rule and then nothing isn't nothing anymore. So that would be one answer to that. But if nothing was turned into something, how is something that came from nothing? But here, I don't even know that nothing was ever a thing or could be a thing. But many theologies propose that God was many. I should just stick with Christianity because I don't know about the other ones. I should undo that comment. Okay. Within Christian theology, God is proposed to have existed before the universe, alone, by itself, with the other gods, if you are a Trinitarian. But nonetheless, it existed and nothing else did. So did God make the universe out of itself, or did it make it out of nothing? Well, if God made the universe out of itself, that would be one thing, but that's not really what theology tends to say in Christianity. It says, no, 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 no. God made it from nothing. So God's allowed to make something from nothing. But why? Because God has that power. Why does God have that power? Because it does. Well, where does God get that power from? It comes from God. It's not an answer. It's just it goes infinitely back onto itself, asking questions about the nature of God. But why go there? Why? I think Carl Sagan said it best, where he said, if you're okay with the universe being eternal, then stop there. If you're not okay with the universe being eternal, and you say, well, there has to be a cause. Maybe the cause is the universe. It caused itself. How does that work? I don't know. But why propose an answer that you don't have any evidence for? Time traveling people from the future came back in time and started the universe. Well, that's an answer, but that's a paradox. So it doesn't matter. It's a paradox that always happened. Some mad scientist created the universe on their computer. Well, where did that universe came from? Doesn't matter. We don't need an explanation for the explanation. So, you run into absurdities there. Let's see. Let's see. Where was I? Have you actually read philosophy? Nick asks. It's irrelevant. I'm not going to answer that question. Something from nothing because no logic is applicable. Silly. No. If you had a true nothing, then you don't have any rules, so you could do anything with it, including getting something from it. So, but I don't think there was a true nothing, or that a true nothing could exist. I could be wrong about that, but you'd have to demonstrate that a nothing existed in the first place. So if you have a demonstration for that, please present your scientific peer-reviewed paper on that. I'm sure you'll win a Nobel for it, but I don't think you have that. Let's see. Has the universe always existed? Maybe. Or and is God eternal? Well, see, again, why posit God? We have the universe. We don't know does not equal God. That's an appeal to ignorance. It's Nick says I got destroyed earlier. Untrue. I destroyed, but apparently you don't understand logic, but that's okay. Yeah, God is allowed because God is God, and God is not equal to human logic. Well, there you go. So God is incoherent, and it's okay that it's incoherent, but the answer that nothing could have done something because there's no rule, which is also incoherent, is not allowed because reasons. Yeah, it's magic. Yeah, okay, you're just trolling now. Come on. The eternal universe has a form of law. I don't know. Is God logical, or I don't know. I mean, if there's a universe, and then there would be a logic to go with it, because logic maps to the universe. The problem, what we do have a problem right now, is that our physics breaks down before the T1 point, before time is a thing. So we don't know how that works because math doesn't work anymore on it. And we're like, well, I don't know. And so I have no idea how in the world to map logic to a question mark. So I'm saying, I don't know. But just because I don't know what the answer is, doesn't mean I don't know what the answer is not. And the answer for me is not a thing that hasn't been demonstrated to even be a thing yet. Grounding logic in reality. Logic maps to the universe. Anyone here have a Discord? What? Oh, this is random as bleep. No, I don't have a Discord, but you can join me here now if you want. I said it was gonna end if nobody joined, but I lied. I was mistaken. I thought that I would end, but there was a lot of good questions, so I wanted to answer those questions. I can't tell if you're an atheist. Okay. I'm a skeptic, so yes, I also don't believe in gods. So that's, I think, an answer. Come on Discord and debate me. No, come on here and debate me. How about a... what? What are you talking about? A#7. Oh, good Discord. Oh, jeez. What philosophy have you read? What philosophy have you read? Why is that relevant? Who cares? Have you read any books on informal logic? Have you read The Lobsterist? If you haven't read The Lobsterist, then you don't know enough to debate my position. So, we could go that route if you want. Oh, okay. You're curious. Okay, so it's a genuine question, not a question as far as in order to undermine me or something of this nature. Kant. I've read Kant. I've read Morton J. Adler. I've read, who else is an actual philosopher? Because I don't think you could say C.S. Lewis is a philosopher or Dawkins. Off the top of my head, those are the two I can think of. Jordan Peterson, I guess he's a philosopher. Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, I've read other books, but I'd have to pull them out and say them because I don't know offhand. But yeah. Sam Harris. No, I haven't actually read any Sam Harris. I've listened to him, but I haven't read him. I'm more interested in logic than I am philosophy. I mean, logic is a subset of philosophy, but as far as like hardcore philosophy, it's like, there's, it's like, well, can I put a cat into a blender and what will that do? It's like, that's philosophy, right? It's like, yeah, what? It's like, who cares, right? I'm more interested in what is or what can be known, and facts, data, hard data, that wins for me. So I'm more interested in science than pure philosophy. Do you accept a burden of proof or claim lack of belief in Christian? There is a burden of proof for anybody that makes any positive universal claim. As far as I don't believe in gods in general or supernatural or ESP, aliens that came here, time travel, a number of things I don't believe. But as far as Christianity, I would say that I know to a reasonable doubt worth that it's not true due to my research. But that research was done a long time ago. It's always possible I missed something. So far, no Christian has been able to present me with a reason that I should check again, because nobody's given me a valid and sound argument. But there's always hope. Certainly the guy from before didn't do it, but anybody's welcome to go ahead and give it a try and be. I just had recently on another video I was responding to this person say, "Oh, you have to read these 5 to 7 books that I tell you to read, otherwise you're not interested in this topic." And I'm like, that's not how the burden of proof works. You have to give me a reason to read those books. So forget about the books. What do they say? What data are they basing their statements on? Because I don't care who said what unless you can show me that it's true. But of course, they're not going to understand that, and they're just going to go, "Oh, you don't care about this topic." I don't have a reason to care yet. So I doubt it until you show me that it's a thing. Yes, I've heard of answers in Genesis, and they're a joke. They're almost as bad as the flat earthers. I mean, have you heard of the Flat Earth Society? That's pretty bad too. An argument for atheism, I don't know that there is one per se. I think that there's an argument for skepticism, which is what I'm more concerned with. But I'm not really interested if people don't believe or don't believe in God. That's not really my my method of madness. I'm more interested that people learn informal logic and are able and willing to question whatever it is they hold most dear. So that might be God, it might be some political idea, it might be, whatever it is that you really, really, really care about. If you're willing and able to question that thing, then that's a good thing. That's what I want people to do. I'm fine. I don't care if people believe in God, whatever. As long as you don't believe in scientific nonsense on top of that, it's fine. It's not really going to, it might hurt you, it might hurt somebody else. I don't know. But it's less harmful than denial of reality. So, but I understand why people believe in God. We're pattern seeking creatures, and we look at things and we try to make sense of them. And maybe what God is just us, and that we don't want to elevate ourselves to be God. So we pretend that God is a different thing separate from us. That could be a possibility. Or it might be that God is nothing like anybody has ever described. And so the word God is insufficient. That might be true as well. But if we don't have a reason to think that is the case, I would say we should doubt it is the case. So the argument for skepticism is, in essence, people can lie, people can trick you. And if the only thing we have to go on is people saying, well, how do you explain this? It's like, I don't know. That's the honest answer. And then say, well, it must be this. No. It doesn't have to be that. How do you know that it's that? And if they don't have an answer, then there's not a positive reason to believe. So doubting is safer, I would say. Let's see. Argument do you give for your skepticism? Yeah, that would be the argument for skepticism is people can lie. People can also be wrong. And because of those two facts, when all we have to rely, at least for this thing, God, whatever that is, it's not like the sun. Like, maybe there's some schmuck out there that doesn't believe in the sun, but it's kind of hard to not believe in something that's that obvious, right? Or the moon. Yeah, there's people that think the moon's a hologram, but, you got to be kind of wacky to think that. You have to actually believe more things to think that the moon is a hologram than to actually think that it's the moon. But we still have a moon to point to at the very least. So at least we have something that I can point to and say, there's the thing that I'm talking about. Now we can debate about it. So, not to play my hand too much, but in the show Rick and Morty, there's an episode where giant heads come to Earth and say, show me what you've got. Well, if God was a giant head in the sky and you were born with this giant head being in the sky, and every day that you existed, you were able to look up and see a giant head in the sky and talk to it, and it could talk back, and people called it God. Well, you might not think it is a God, but at least there'd be something to look at and examine. So we don't even have that for God, and we have the ability to point to just about everything else except for abstract ideas and objects. So because we can't empirically verify a God, we also can't test God, and there doesn't appear to be a valid and sound argument for God, then it probably is an object of the mind, and thus that's the only place it actually exists, and there you go. I don't do Discord. Sorry, I do this. This is what I do. We have proof cards being made. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, with this question of, well, what is it that we say, and that because you say I don't know, therefore you can't rule out X? No, you don't have to know what the answer is to know what the answer is not. I don't know what 5,000 to the power of 47 is, but I know it's greater than 5,000. I know it's not a negative number. So there's a lot of things I know it isn't without knowing what the answer is. Now, somebody could plug in what 5,000 to the power of 47 is and give me the answer, and I'd have to check on a calculator to make sure that their answer was true, because they could be wrong or mistaken. So there you go. Well, Nathaniel, you could kill people and still be fine even if you believe in a God. Because belief in God doesn't negate your ability to do or not do things. You would have to show that people that believe in God never do anything wrong, ever. And even if it was the case that people never did anything wrong that believe in God, that doesn't mean that we suddenly believe in God. We need evidence to think that it's a thing. It's like, well, if I believe in it, I'll stop killing people. Well, how about I just stop killing people? And I still don't believe in it. So then what? What does that mean? There's no association causation there, so there's a problem. Let's see. You can't try it, I dare you, Jen. What were they saying? What is it that I'm daring to do? Where did it come from? Where did what come from? Where did what? We don't know. Where did all of it come from? We don't know is the answer. I don't know is the answer. I don't know why that's so difficult to accept. It's okay to have a mystery. It's okay to not know stuff. You know? I'm okay with uncertainty. It's much more interesting to have a mystery. But that doesn't mean we'll never know. And that doesn't mean that the answer is fill in the blank, because if you say, well, I don't know, therefore X, well, that's an appeal to ignorance. They don't know. Who doesn't know good or bad? Humans? Humans learn, and animals as well. Well, we are animals, but we dogs and cats and other creatures have been shown to do actions that we would call morals. There's a whole study they've done with primates where they gave one cucumber and the other one they gave some other food, and the one got really upset because it was unfair. So that's a sense of fairness and a sense of fair play. What's that if it's not morality? I've seen videos where a dog will rescue another animal from the street or some pit or whatever, and cats too. I've seen that. I've seen other animals do this. It doesn't always happen. I saw one video where a lion was chilling next to an antelope, and I'm like, no, that antelope's dead. But the lion was full and wasn't hungry, so the antelope was fine. Now, of course, probably the antelope got out of there, I would think, or died. But nonetheless, there's some sort of instinct that then, as you get a more complicated brain, becomes more complicated. So an ant doesn't have as much instinct as a creature that has a more complex brain does. And then that animal doesn't have as much instinct as the next thing that has a more complex brain, and so on. So these instincts become morals and become complicated because we have complicated brains. Animals don't have laws. They don't have the ability to make laws per se, but they certainly do have a structure and a society. Even lobsters have a hierarchy of who's in charge. So animals certainly have behaviors that all that would have to happen is their brains to become a little bit more complex, and then suddenly they would have laws and morals like we do. The only reason we don't. Whoa, there's somebody here.
Yeah, that's not true because God created all the animals of the earth.
You got an echo going here. Can you turn off the thing in the background there?
Yeah, 1 second.
Steelorus? Oh man, I'm not going to pronounce that name anytime soon. Steel. Nope, I have no idea. Well, when he gets on, he'll tell me how to say his name. Well, see, this is going on longer than I expected. That's good. I guess putting it as a question atheist can't answer got a lot of attention from theists, which is weird. You would think like it would be the other way around, but okay. All right. Well, he's still sorting that out. Let's see. Compelled unbeliever. Hey, how's it going? Been a while. Yeah. Animals do have law. Well, I don't know if we'd call them laws. I guess you would in a way. Certainly, the chimpanzee and other primates certainly have a behavioral system that they abide by. So, what would that be other than law? If a chimp kills another chimp, that chimp is usually torn to pieces. Unless they're doing it for dominance or something. Usually they kill others outside the group. So hey, I wonder if humans, we don't ever kill people that are outside our group. Oh, wait, we do. Maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we could figure out a better way. But that goes back to my statement that I want people to be able to question whatever it is they hold most dear. Because if you come to the table of debate and you say, I will never change this thing, and this thing is I want to kill you, that's a bad thing because there's no way to reason with that person. Like, look, I really don't want you to kill me. Well, but that's the one thing that I won't change. Anything else I'll change, but that stays. Like, well, look, I'm gonna have to put you in prison or kill you. Those are my only choices now. And you've reduced my options to that. Please be reasonable and change that so we can negotiate, because I don't want to imprison you or kill you. Well, this is what my Bible says to do, so that's what I'm gonna do. Okay, well, then you go to prison or I kill you. That's you force my hand, What's goo? What's goo? I don't know. We don't seem to not be able to kill one another. Yeah, I mean, that is something that I've pondered, that, why is it that we can't come to a table of discussion and say, look, I don't want to kill you. You don't want to kill me, I hope. And whatever this debate is over, let's resolve this with words, not with fists, not with violence, not with physical power. Let's resolve it with intellect, or if we're going to oh, here we go. I think he's back.
Yeah, intellect comes from God.
Here we go. Hi, how do I pronounce your name there?
Stellaris.
Stellaris. There we go. I like that. Stellaris. Okay, hello, Stellaris. How are you? Welcome to this thing. I'm going to attack your ideas, not you, the person. What do you want to talk about? What is it you want to say here?
That truth is that which conforms to the mind of God, and saying anything otherwise will lead to an incoherent worldview.
Okay. So what do you mean by truth?
Yeah, definition of truth comes from God because he revealed it to us through the Bible.
Okay. So which Bible?
The Holy Bible, the Christian God of the Bible.
Okay, let me be more specific. Which version of the Bible?
Any version, King James, the original Greek manuscripts.
Okay, you're aware that King James has a lot of missing verses and
yeah, that doesn't matter. That doesn't change the foundational pillars of Christian doctrine.
Oh, but it might.
No, it does not, actually.
What are the foundational doctrines of Christianity?
That God sent his son down to the earth. Son died on the cross for our sins, and that only through Christ can you be saved.
Not every Christian agrees with that, though.
Well, then they're not using my definition of truth, that which conforms to the mind of God.
But they're using the same Bible.
They're not holding it to the same truth standard that God says that we should, because those scriptures are God-breathed.
But how do you know that they're not doing that?
How do I know? Because God revealed it to me in such a way that I cannot be wrong about what I know about him.
Okay. So you're a presuppositionalist?
That's correct.
Okay. We're not. Do lobsters exist?
They exist in virtue of God's will. He sustains everything through his will, through his creative acts. He created lobsters.
So yes or no? Lobsters exist?
Well, yes, but I speak from the Christian view, so I had to explain what my unstated premises were.
So, but lobsters exist, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, great. We agree on something. I don't really deal with precept too much. Karen S does a far better job with that, but
Well, I did want to go back to something you said earlier. How do Christians know not to sin anymore?
it doesn't matter because you're already right in your mind, so there's nothing I could say that would ever.
Well, I want to explain to you the Christian view, and that is
you want to explain your view that you assert to be right
well, I
before
go based off
anything
what the
is
Bible
done.
is.
Yeah,
I only go based
it's
off what the
completely
Bible says.
circular. Right. I know what precept is. It's completely circular and illogical
Well,
and every level.
an ultimate authority can only verify itself.
No, that doesn't make any coherent sense.
Do you reject all circular reasoning and principle?
I reject presuppositionalism 100%.
But do you reject circular reasoning and principle?
Circular reasoning? Yeah, I reject your presuppositionalism, yes.
But all circular reasoning is that. Do you reject it in principle?
All circular reasoning depends what you mean about that, but your statements are I can't debate you because it won't matter.
Okay. Well, I do want to go back to what you said for the people on the show to realize.
You don't understand. I can't debate you because it wouldn't matter because you're a presuppositionalist. So there's
I don't want to debate. I want to explain to your viewers.
No, there's no explanation here because the thing with precept is there is no logical argument given for it, nor can there be because it breaks the rules of logic from the get-go by assuming its outcome before the outcome's been proven and then asserts the outcome without any proof. It is circular in nature and nothing more. I'm not interested in presuppositionalism. You're welcome to do it anywhere else, but not here. I'm not interested in it.
Well, how about I say something and then I leave, if that's okay with you?
Let's see. Is it okay with me?
Yeah, when you repent, you gain a new nature.
Not interested. Okay. Hi, Nathaniel. Welcome. How are you doing? Oh, look, he's back. We got Fred back.
Yeah, I'm back. So I was listening in. The gentleman asked you, do you reject all forms of circular reasoning?
I reject presuppositionalism.
I didn't ask you that question.
Well, what do you mean by circular reasoning?
Yeah, I just want to make a point that when you're asked a direct question, you give evasive response. Now, here's my question.
I know. It's because I don't answer loaded questions.
Okay, hey, could you tell me what a loaded question is?
Well, you didn't answer my question, so
notice how you've been evasive again.
Yeah, I know what the answer is, but
I'll wait till you stop interrupting.
Okay, well, you're gonna be waiting a while then. So, Nathaniel, how's it going?
So, in other words, you don't actually want to have a dialogue, do you?
No, I do. It's just the thing is, I understand logic. I don't know if you do. I don't know. We'll see.
When you say logic, what in your model of reality?
There's only one reality. There's not my model reality or your model. There's only one reality.
Listen, you just cut me off.
Yeah, I did, and I'm going to continue to do so to clarify my point.
Are you afraid of allowing me to converse with you?
I'm not afraid of anything because I have facts.
When you say you believe in logic,
I didn't say I believe in logic. I don't need to believe in logic.
Me again. This is a tactic.
No, I had to clarify that I don't have to believe in logic. I know that it's a thing that works.
Okay, when you say logic, do you mean the law of identity and non-contradiction?
Those are some of the laws of logic, yes.
Okay. Now, is the law of non-contradiction, you accept that, right?
There's some debate about it, but yes, I accept it.
Okay. Now, what is your rational basis that for all entities that exist, that they always equal themselves and they can never coexist or equal their negation?
That's a law of you're talking about the law of identity or the law of non-contradiction?
The law of non-contradiction states that for all entities that exist, represented by the letter A, that they cannot equal or coexist with their negation, that is true at all times and all places. Do you hold that it is true at all times and all places?
It seems to be the case, yes.
I didn't ask you if it seems to be the case.
Well, look, you're asking for an absolute. I won't do that. I won't do an absolute because I
like to be able to answer and respond to you without you ever talking. Now,
well, that's too bad.
Do you hold? I didn't ask you if it seems that way, because seems would be a reference to a subset. I'm asking you about the whole of reality. Does the law of non-contradiction apply to all entities that exist?
It seems to be that way.
Okay, the seems to be that way only refers to a subset. I'm referring to the whole.
I don't know about the whole.
Okay,
I can only talk about what we've observed. I can't talk about what we haven't observed.
The law of non-contradiction would apply to the whole, not the subset.
No, not necessarily.
No, you listen, dude. Listen, I've studied this. You don't know.
Oh, really? You did study
the law of non.
Let's take
law of non-contradiction.
Let's test your knowledge. What's an HS?
Excuse me.
What's HS, MT, M?
I'm not.
And an HS.
Now,
what's a modus ponens?
Okay.
What's the difference between informal and formal logic?
Okay. How many questions do you want to ask? Now.
9,000. What is modus ponens? Let's go with that.
Modus ponens. If A entails B, A therefore B.
Good. Okay. What's now, modus tollens?
Modus tollens would be the reverse. It would be in the negative.
Okay. What's hypothetical syllogism?
Now, hold on a second. Okay, we're gonna go back to the law of non-contradiction. Now, the law of non-contradiction is prescriptive in nature, not descriptive. When you respond to me by saying it seems to be that way, that's a reference to descriptive of a subset. When I ask you, is it the case that the law of non-contradiction is true at all times and all places? That is a reference to the prescription of universality for all entities. Now,
no, because that's not what logic says.
Let me finish, please. Okay. Now, I'm gonna be very straightforward with you. I'm not trying to be rude.
You can go ahead and be rude. It doesn't bother me.
I'm not trying to be rude.
No, go ahead. You're gonna have to try hard to be rude. I'm a skeptic on the internet. I've seen worse.
You are constantly over talking.
No, I give an explanation and you over talk me. So you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to converse with you like an adult. This is why I left the chat the first time.
You left the chat because you didn't want to hear my analogy, which blew your burden shifting out of the water.
How are you going to continue to overtalk me?
Yes.
Why?
Because it's my channel. I do what I want.
So, in other words, you're actually afraid of letting me speak.
No, I'm giving my explanation, and then in the middle of my explanation, you overtalk me. So I'm doing the same thing to you that you're doing to me because I'm following the golden rule.
I'm not overtalking. Now, the law of non-contradiction, the law refers to its universality.
No, it doesn't. That's wrong.
The law, what does the word law in law of non-contradiction refer to?
You tell me if you're the expert.
Well, you just told me that it doesn't apply universally.
Because you think it applies universally, but
the word law in the law of non-contradiction, it refers that for all entities that exist,
no, we can't talk about all entities. We can only talk about entities that we've observed.
What you're not doing is because I'm trying to converse with you.
Hold on, we've got somebody doing background here.
Now it's Nathaniel. Now, law of non-contradiction states that for any entity A, it cannot equal or coexist with its negation. So the law refers to its universality, not a subset. Okay?
Well, there's this thing. There's a problem because I don't know what you think. How logic maps, or in a sense, this is a debate within the field of logic itself of does logic map to reality, or are these rules independent of whatever happens to be the case? And I am more prone to think that it could be that we discover something that negates any of these laws. I don't think that we will, but that doesn't mean that it won't happen. So I'm not willing to say that these are absolutes.
Okay, then without the law of non-contradiction, then any statement you make, it could potentially coexist with this.
See, this is a mistake that's being made here, because I'm not saying that it is this way.
Dude, you're
I'm
not
saying that
listening. Listen, I am really.
I can't explain myself without you interrupting me. Come on.
I'm not interrupting you. I'm saying you're not even listening to me. You're talking.
No, because I'm explaining the thing with logic is deeper than I think you really comprehend, because there are different philosophies of logic. There's classical logic, and then there's other forms of logic that have debated this, like the law of identity has been debated. So is the law of non-contradiction. Now, I don't know that those debates.
No, what you're referring to is the law that's in question would be the law of excluded middle, not the law.
That one's also debated. They're all debated, but yeah, they've all been debated by somebody.
All right, now, since you lack belief in God,
here we go back to this.
Right.
Back
Well,
to start.
this is a question that you never answered, so we're going to go back to the first question. Now, since you lack belief in God as the personal absolute, what is the absolute that secures for all the meaningfulness of any statements we make that replaces God? What would that be? What is absolute in existence?
Math.
Can you show me the number 2?
No, it's an abstract object.
You showed me if something can't be demonstrated, then it isn't deemed to be exist.
It wouldn't exist unless brains made it able to exist in the mind only. It doesn't exist in anywhere except in the mind.
Okay,
just like God.
Right. So how do you? Well, so you're saying that God therefore does not in actuality exist?
God exists in the same abstract way as numbers exist.
Okay. So
in the mind and nowhere else.
Okay. So you're now no longer lacking belief in God. Are you asserting that no creator God exists?
There's no demonstration that there is even a thing called God. I'll go back to what I said before.
Okay. Are you asserting that no creator God exists?
There's no demonstration that that's even a thing.
That's not an answer to my.
I can't give you an answer to a loaded question.
The fact, okay, when you
go back to my analogy.
So okay? Does the
You're shifting the burden? Show that there's a thing called God first.
Dude, your reason. Listen to me. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm not trying to be rude.
No. Look, you don't understand it. You don't understand.
You are over talking me.
I don't. I'm not interested. I don't care.
You're over talking me. Now,
you like to talk for a long time. You don't like to hear the answer.
No, you're just simply being rude.
No, I'm being critical.
No, you're not. You're simply over talking me.
You're over talking. Well, I'll stop over talking you. Stop over talking me.
Is it your position that God does not exist?
What do you mean by God?
Okay, now you're changing the subject. And you just said a minute ago that God has not been demonstrated. Now,
that's correct.
You would not have used the word God had you not understood what the word God means. So now what
is your position that flabbergast doesn't exist?
Over talking me again.
See, you don't see. You're done. You're done. I'm trying to make the same. Okay. See.
Okay.
Tell you this. When you're done talking, say over, so I know that you're done. How about that?
Now, when you say what is God, you're attempting to change the subject because you previously used the word God in a meaningful and intelligible way. When you said God has not been demonstrated, if you didn't have an idea or a concept of what the word God meant, you could not have made the statement God has not been demonstrated. But then when I ask you, do you deny that, do you affirm that no creator God exists because you don't want to answer the question? You now want to say, what is God, when previously you used the word God in a meaningful way? Okay. Now, do you deny that any creator God exists? I'm waiting.
No, you didn't say done, so I didn't know you were done.
Okay. Do you deny that any creator God exists? I'm done.
Okay. There's so many problems with this. Okay. Remember, I gave an analogy. You might have left while I gave that analogy. Okay. About the ghost and the door, right? I don't know if you heard that, or do I need to repeat it? Can you take that in the other room, please? Okay, hold on a second. I've got background, real life going on.
Do you deny that a creator God exists?
Okay, now the answer is more complicated than a yes or no because it is a loaded question. Because the word God in and of itself hasn't necessarily been defined, because anyone can define it to be any particular thing. You're defining it as a creator, whatever that means. But so we already then, to accept this, we have to accept that whatever God is, it creates. Okay, well, people create, so people are God. Okay, yes, God exists because people are God. That's one way to answer that question. But another deeper way to answer it is to admit the fact that whatever God is, or whatever it is that you want to define it as, has not been demonstrated to even be a thing in the first place. And what I mean by that is, again, with the ghost and the door, if my door opens on its own, and I don't know how it happened or why or whatever, and to just say, well, it must be a ghost, first I have to have an example of a ghost. And if I don't have an example of a ghost, then how in the world can I say ghost in the first place? But as far as it not necessarily having a meaning to the word, flabbergasted doesn't have any meaning unless I give it one. And for me to say, well, do you believe in flabbergasted? No, of course you don't believe it. You don't know anything about it. How could you believe in it yet?
So when people talk about God, you don't know what that means?
Well, I don't want to assume that I know what they mean by God.
Okay, when people mean by God, they mean that God is a absolute conscious mind.
Not all people.
May I finish, please? When people in Western speaking English use the word God in general, what they mean in general is that God is a personal conscious mind that is eternal, that has the power to effectuate and initiated and created the universe. Now,
okay, that might be you might be correct.
I just gave you an operational definition of God. Now, since I've given you a definition of God, do you assert that no creator God exists?
That definition of God has not been shown to be a thing. Therefore, until it has been shown to be a thing, I am skeptical of it being a thing.
So the answer is, your answer is you don't assert that no creator God exists.
I can't assert that it exists or doesn't exist.
May I finish, please? Okay. Now, I ask you, do you simply assert that no creator God exists? Either you affirm that no creator God exists, or you don't. Which is it?
Well, Yahweh doesn't exist. I can give you a definite no on that one.
Dude, this is the problem in the conversation.
The other God, I don't know. Maybe it could exist. It might not exist. I don't know.
You need to focus on what I'm saying.
Right, but I'm clarifying it.
I know that. Now. Now.
Do you have a problem with me clarifying that the word God is ambiguous?
You know the difference between strong and weak atheism?
Yes.
Okay,
I'm a skeptic, so it doesn't matter.
Would you define yourself as a strong or a weak atheist?
I'm a skeptic.
Okay. So you're neither a strong or a weak atheist?
I don't care what label you want to give me. It doesn't matter to me.
Well, it's also been termed positive and negative atheism.
I'm really not interested in that.
Positive atheist would deny the existence of God, and negative...
I don't... It doesn't matter what the label is. I still don't believe in it. What do you got?
Okay, so your reason for not believing in God, is it because God has not been verified via sense perception?
Okay, now we're getting to a question I can answer. Okay, whatever this thing is, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Whatever X is, let's not make it God. It could be anything. I require one of three things to think it's even a thing. Empirical evidence. Now, by empirical evidence, I mean it can be seen, not necessarily just with naked eye, but with any machinery or mechanism we might have to visualize the phenomenon at hand. Okay, secondly, if we don't have empirical evidence, then we must have a repeatable test. This is the scientific method in essence. If we can't do tests on it, then we can't really discuss it. If we don't have either of those, then I do have a third option, which is a valid and sound argument. That is an argument that is both coherent and it contains no logical fallacies, and it is structured correctly within informal logic. If I don't have any of those three things, I must be skeptical of the conclusion.
Good. Okay. Do you believe that there is causality?
To a certain point, there seems to be causality. So I would say most of the time there is causality.
So you believe that there are causal connections between events. Okay.
Most events have some sort of cause. Some events do not appear to have
Sure
cause.
that since you're an intelligent man, you understand that appealing to sense perception would be begging the question to justify causality. So what is your argument for causality?
I don't know that, like I said, there are certain things that aren't necessarily caused
Wait a minute. You told me
within quantum physics, at any rate, but we're not really there. But do you have empirical evidence for God?
Hold on.
Do you have empirical evidence for God? Yes or no?
Well, hold on a second.
You have empirical evidence for God? Yes or no?
I'll address that momentarily.
Because I'm not interested in going over why my 3 things are required. Those are my requirements.
Why are you keep on over talking me? Okay, when people do that, it means you're afraid to
No, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. No,
It might mean I just don't like you.
Talking. Now, you told me your requirements for belief.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wouldn't say belief. I would say to even think it's a thing. But yeah.
I want to ask you, do you have a problem with self-control, not over talking me?
I do, actually.
Okay. Well, then maybe you might want to get some help for that.
I am getting help. Thank you.
All right. Now, you told me your criterion for belief was empirical evidence, including testing, and if not that there had to be a logical argument for it. Now, you can't appeal to empirical evidence to justify causality because empirical endeavors already entail the presupposition of causality. So all you would be left with would be an argument for causality. Since you do believe in causality, what is your
or the test?
Would you please stop over talking me?
I don't know when you're done.
Now, no, you know that I'm talking. You're just using it as an excuse to be rude and obnoxious. Now, what is your argument that there are causal connections and causal relations between events?
We have tests that can confirm that.
Okay. When you appeal to testing, does that involve sense perception?
To some extent.
Does sense perception already entail causality?
No.
Yes, it does. Sense perception requires the presupposition of a causality. Now, can you explain to me eyesight without causality?
I'm not a biologist, so no, I could not explain eyesight.
Does eyesight require causality for its meaningfulness?
I'm not sure how to answer the question. I'm not a biologist.
The answer to the question is yes. Causality.
Are you a biologist?
It has nothing to do with biology. Causality, eyesight requires causal relations and connections for its meaningfulness. In other words, you have to have photons. You have to hold on 1 second.
Is that an old style phone? All right. Well, Fred's taking a call. How about Nathan or Antholio have a?
No.
Okay, so Nathan or Nathaniel, you haven't talked.
I'm doing great.
I didn't have to answer.
I'm having some technical difficulties, you know.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm still waiting.
I'm gonna let Fred talk for a minute. Okay. By the way, I really like the conversation between you. You know.
Yeah. I might need to cool off for a bit because Fred has indicated to me that I'm not being as logical as I could be. And the thing is that I'm trying to not interrupt him, but I'm trying to say what my position actually is, because a lot of times he's asserting what my position is without asking me. And that irritating.
The way to fix that is
deconverted man. You have to give an argument for causality.
No, I don't have to give. Look, these are my 3 things that I require. Okay, that's it. You have them.
You're over talking me again in order to shut me down because you're afraid of.
No, I'm not. I'm not afraid of anything. I have facts. You have faith. I'll always be right. You'll always be wrong. End of story.
Now,
do you have empirical evidence? Yes or no?
You told me that you believe in causality. Now,
No, I did not say that.
If you appeal,
I
you
don't have to believe in it. I know that it's a thing. We have tests that confirm it.
You're not understanding it. Testing requires sense perception. Sense perception.
No, it doesn't. Not necessarily.
Can you stop being rude?
No, I can't.
Okay, so in other words, you're so intimidated.
No, I want to give my answer, and you don't want to hear it.
No, I do want to hear you, but you
then look, you're just talking and not answering the question. Okay, I'm not going to go into.
Now I'm going to
look. Do you have empirical evidence, a repeatable test, or a valid and sound argument for the thing that you're calling God? Yes or no? Okay. That's what I want to get to. I'm not going to sit here and explain why these things are needed or why I require them or whatever. I'm not going to do that. I'm not interested in doing that.
Here's the problem.
Here's the problem. You don't have empirical evidence, repeatable test, or a valid and sound argument for God.
And over talking me.
Give me those things. That's all I care about.
All right. Now, whenever you ask me a question and I try to respond, why do you keep on?
Do you have empirical evidence for God? Yes or no?
I'll answer the question. The answer to the question is this: that which is absolute, that which is eternal and absolute, and the non-dependency upon which everything depends, you cannot have empirical evidence for that which is.
So you do not have empirical evidence. That's the answer. So no is the answer.
I'm trying to explain something to you. Now, your criterion of empirical evidence would destroy your own position, because in order to have empirical evidence, there has to exist causality and laws of nature. Now, you can't appeal to empirical evidence to support causality, because causality would have to exist first before you could appeal to empirical endeavors such as eyesight. Now, do you understand? This is a question. Do you understand that when you appeal to sense perception and empirical endeavors in order to justify causality, that is begging the question, because causality is presupposed in sense perception? Do you realize that that's a fallacy?
That's a loaded question, so I'm not going to answer it.
Okay. Can you tell me what precisely, in one sentence, what is a loaded question?
When did you last stop beating your wife?
I understand that that's an example of a loaded question, but can you tell me in one sentence what is?
No, it's not going to be one sentence. No.
I can answer that in one sentence.
Well, okay. I guess if I don't put a period until a very long, lengthy explanation, I could do it.
I can tell you in one.
Okay, so what it is, I don't know why we're pretending like we don't understand fallacies, because I do. So a loaded question is one that you cannot answer with a simple yes or no, because all questions contain premises in them. Okay, you're talking over me now. See, it's okay. It's okay only when you do it. That's why I've been doing it to you. All right? Okay. Loaded question is one where you cannot answer with a simple yes or no, and you cannot answer it the way the question is worded, because doing so would accept the premises built into the question, which is what you continue to do. Is there empirical evidence for this thing? There is not. That's the answer.
What was the objectionable premise?
In the question you asked me a question in such that answering it would require me to essentially admit that I'm guilty of the thing that you were asking me the question about.
What was the objectionable premise?
That was that I just said that was the objection. That if I had answered your question, whatever it was, I can't.
No, the question I said is, do you understand that appealing to sense perception to justify causality is begging the question?
See, that assumes that is correct, and I don't agree with this idea necessarily. But here's the thing, okay?
Does sense perception?
What we're dancing around, and what we've been dancing around, is how do we determine what is real? Okay. In reality that we all share. Okay, we'll start with the base axioms. Reality is real. There are minds that exist. No, I'm not. I'm trying to be.
You're changing the sub.
No, oh jeez.
Now, I ask you,
Ah,
does sense perception
this guy doesn't want to hear anything. He wants to hear.
does sense perception require causality?
It might.
Can you give me an example of how it does not?
I don't know. I really don't know. Oh, okay, good. He's gone. Thank goodness. I don't know.
Well, he ran away
Good.
because he knew. It's funny that he was accusing you of being intimidated. He ran away because he knew, just like Antonio knows, that he can't actually defend his positions. Right, Antonio? Can't actually defend your positions either, Antonio.
I don't know
You're just
why we're
gonna
dragging
run
him into it.
He's gonna stay silent. Well, he's actually he's basically a ball licker.
Okay,
That guy,
Carol,
Fred
Carol,
Gwynn.
Carol, let's not throw insults at people. Okay, we don't need to do that.
Yeah,
only
let's
attack
try
the
to have a civil conversation. Like, don't name call.
yeah. Look, I disagree
Do you know who you were talking to? You were talking to Darwin's Greatest Hits. The YouTube
Oh, is that
channel.
who that is? Okay, well, so he disbelieves in evolution.
Is.
So that
Yes.
guy, the guy I was just talking to, doesn't.
He's a young creationist.
Okay.
So is Antonio.
See, I didn't.
So is
I don't.
Antonio.
Carol, I don't know who that guy was, and if you can show me that he is the guy that you're claiming, that's great. But it doesn't really matter as far as the argument was essentially how do you trust senses, and it's like, look, and then like how do we test things?
What he does is engage in something called presuppositional apologetics.
Yeah, it sounded.
Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I already kicked a guy out for that, but yeah.
The thing is that he's able to ask you questions, but when you start asking him questions, right, all he can do is answer a question with a question. Rather than answer any questions.
That did seem to be the case, but I didn't get into the whole younger stuff.
He doesn't actually have any arguments.
Well, I mean, if I asked you, Carol, I said, look, do you have empirical evidence for X, whatever that is? It's a yes or no. I mean, it's really simple, right?
Well, I mean, the thing that's interesting about it, right, is that he wants to say that there can't be evidence for or any argument to the existence of God, right?
Right. So then say that.
But then if that's the case, that just means he doesn't have any justification for the belief.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's where it was going because I didn't really get it. But at any rate, I don't know, what his other beliefs are or whatever. All that mattered to me was the argument or lack thereof. Are you playing the thing that we've got some echo going on?
I don't think it's coming from me.
Oh, that might have been the Nathan. Okay, so I haven't heard from Nathaniel at all, so I wanted to give him.
So if I start cutting out randomly, it's my microphone. I need a new headset, and it's arriving today, so I might cut out and stuff.
Okay.
So just kind of bringing this up, young Earth theory. It seems ridiculous to somebody who doesn't quite believe in God and stuff, but
it is ridiculous to many scientists. Yes.
When you see radiometric dating, it's only good for thousands of years. If it goes over millions of years, it doesn't become accurate.
That's incorrect.
Well, just because there's radiation, the amount of radiation actually kind of proves that there is a God, because the radiation will completely die out over time. Yeah,
well, radiation, do you understand what a half-life of radiation, right? Like, I mean, I don't look. Yeah. I'm not going to give you as eloquent an answer as, say, Aaron Ra could, because I don't do the science. I do the logic. All right. Here's the logic of it from my perspective. We have the overwhelming majority of scientists, many of who believe in God, but not a lot, that agree that the age of the Earth is 4.54 billion years, and the age of the universe is about 13 billion years. And they do this because of several lines of evidence, one being radiometric dating, but the other being where the stars are, because the speed of light is a known constant. And so some of the stars that we see in the night sky, we wouldn't be able to see if the Earth was younger than it is. So,
okay.
if you the problem with young Earth and all those other things is when you deny science, you're saying that your God can't exist because your God is denying reality. 1 + 1 = 1,000, therefore God. If that's what you're saying, then your God can't exist. So when you say the Earth is not 4.54 billion years old, you're basically saying your God can't exist by default.
That's a tough question.
Here's my stance on it. If your God exists, and it might, it has to conform to what reality is, right? Not the other way around. Like if we discover that the Earth is however old, that's how it is. And then it's a matter of maybe we don't understand what we think God is telling us, not the other way around, right?
Also, do you think it's convenient that we're in the right amount? Like this is going to be in the new subject. This is in we're in a good part of our little galaxy or little thing.
Mm-hmm.
The Earth is just right from the sun, so we don't burn to death.
Mm-hmm.
And we're far enough so we don't get frozen to death.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's very, very convenient. Almost like there was a God who decided, hey, listen, this Earth needs to be on the third part of this little.
How many solar systems are there?
What do you mean by solar systems?
Well, like our solar system, right?
Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because in the Milky Way, about how many solar systems are there?
Well, isn't there a lot of solar systems?
Trillions. Trillions.
Well, if you do the math and probability, only about 4,000 planets would be inhabitable. But they would be too far away for us to get to.
Okay. I'm not sure where you're getting those numbers, but let's just say that's the case. Okay, so on what was the number, 4,000?
Yeah, I actually got numbers from Prager University, so
right, so they're disqualified. Okay, so sorry, they are. They're not basing on science. So,
well, I'm not sure about that. I mean,
no,
the guy who literally studies the stars.
I PragerU is a Christian sort of thing. That's not enough to disqualify it, but it's not a scientific peer-reviewed paper. So the numbers are not relevant for that reason. But I'm glad you were able to say, look, I got it from Prager. Okay, that disqualifies it because they would have to get it from a legitimate source. And I kind of suspect they didn't. But they might have, but you'd have to find that source and just give that. But here's the thing. Let's say it's 4,000 out of whatever the number is. Okay, you still have a 4,000 chance that there's stuff there. That means it's likely. That means that if we were on one of those other 999 planets, we would still be like, wow, we got lucky.
But don't you think that would be way too convenient?
No. There's nothing convenient at all about it. It's just a matter of have you heard the puddle have you heard the puddle analogy at all?
No, I've never heard of the puddle.
Okay, this comes from Douglas Adams, and it's the puddle has somehow magically gained sentience, and the water says, "Hey, this puddle is so well formed for me. It's amazing. It must have been made for me."
Sorry.
Now,
my microphone's so bad. I think I'm gonna have to leave because my microphone is so bad. I'm not leaving because I can't answer these questions.
No, it's okay.
It's just I need a new headset, and it's
all right.
bad.
Sure. Well, you're welcome. You're welcome back.
Well, listen, dude. Listen, it's great talking to you. All right.
Oh,
It's nice
thank
to
you.
hear different opinions.
Well,
And
it's nice talking to you
right
too.
guy, you guys kind of need like a person to stand in the middle and say, hey, let him finish his point, and then you can go. Kind
Yeah,
of like
yeah, I
man.
might need a moderator. Look, I do have an anger control problem. I'm happy to admit that. Well, I'm not happy to admit it. I'm not happy, but I don't mind admitting it. But I do as far as the thing with Young Earth or Young Universe or any of that is, I would advise you to learn the science, because what if there is a God, it has to align with reality. And don't let what you think the Bible says dictate what God is to you, because that would be doctrinology. You'd be worshiping the Bible instead of God. And so, as a former believer, it hurts me when Christians do that, because it makes Christians look dumb. And I'm fine with the belief in God, but not okay with the denial of science and the misunderstandings thereof. And so you can believe in God and be reasonable about it, but it's a journey to get there. I hope you take that journey.
All right, dude. Thank you for the advice.
All right.
See you later, dude.
Bye. Okay, back to Carol. Or you haven't heard anything from, what's his name? Antonio.
Yeah.
Antonio, you're on. You want to say anything? No? Okay. I mean, the mic's open. Hello? Hello? Antonio? Nope. Nothing. All right. Carol, what's on your mind?
Yeah.
Is that the right pronunciation, or am I screwing up your name there?
Um.
How do I say your name? Carl? Carl?
You can call me Jack.
Okay, Jack's better. I can say that word. I was trying to pronounce your avatar name.
Hold on a second. I gotta switch connections.
Okay. Well, I've been missing chat. I'm sure there's been all sorts of insanity in chat while I've been away. Oh my word, there's so much insanity in chat. Okay, let's see. Oh my word. Let's see. Whew. Deconverted Man probably doesn't have an answer to the problem of criterion. What the bleep is that? I don't even know what that is, so I probably don't have an answer to that. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. Trying to answer. Yes. Let's see. Discord. Nick is desperately trying to get people on Discord. Do you have empirical evidence for God?
Rejoined the call. Was not willing to speak.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes. Hello.
My bad, man. I was having mic problems earlier.
All right. Well, you're not now. What's on your mind there? This has become the Skeptic Experience show. I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, Antonio, this gentleman had a question for Darth Dawkins that Darth Dawkins wasn't able to answer, right? So Darth Dawkins, basically, his view is that there's no evidence for God. Is that right?
That would seem to be the answer. Well, I said, do we have empirical? I require one of three things, and he wanted to question those three things, I suppose. But nonetheless, what's on your mind, Antonio? What do you want to talk about? What's going on?
Yeah, you said earlier that when you're looking at the concept of God, right? Before you can rule it out, you said it'll have to be presented as an actual sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
So, like, when you say that it has to be a thing, do you mean it has to be internally non-contradictory? Do you mean that it has to actually exist? That do you mean that it has to be conceivable in the mind? What do you mean by that?
Okay, well, that's a fair question. When we are referencing things that are real, that are not just okay. Let me back up a bit. Okay, I'll go back to the ghost analogy because it's a little bit easier to deal with. I see the door open and I say it must be a ghost. So I need an example of a ghost. So how would I produce an example of a ghost? Well, it depends what a ghost is. Let's say that a ghost is this energy, and that's just for whatever reason we call energy a ghost. And the energy behaves in X, Y, and Z ways, and we've labeled it ghost. Okay, all of that would be testable. Otherwise, we couldn't say that it was that thing. So in order to say that X is Z, we have to have some sort of methodology to demonstrate that that's what it is. Now, either that's an axiom, it can't not be that, or it's a tautology, or there's an external explanation for it that we gain by empirical evidence or repeated test or a valid and sound argument. So almost everything that there is, we can do one of those three things to. And usually the things that exist only in the mind, like numbers and letters and musical notes, those things we can't provide empirical evidence or test for because they're just constructs of the mind. They don't exist the same way that a keyboard or a computer exists. So the ghost might be a thing that's energy, but then I would need some sort of scientific test to show that that's what's opening the door. But I have to have that thing and say, here ghost equals this, here's the evidence of that, and so I don't have evidence of that part. Does that make sense to you?
Well, it seems like you're ruling it out in a different sense, though, that you're not even bringing it to the table. So I don't know if you're talking about ruling it out in the sense that you can't bring it to the table, or ruling it out as an explanation for something.
Right. I don't know that I can honestly say ruling it out in that sense. Like in a technical way, I guess you could say until I know it's even a thing on the table, I can't either rule it out or not. I'm like stuck between, like, I can't say it isn't, I can't say it. I don't even know what you're talking about per se. Now, once it's defined, then I say, okay, fine. How do we know that that definition is what that thing is? And if the answer is not forthcoming, then it's still not even on the table yet.
Well, how do you know?
I don't see how it could be invoked as an explanation if
the
whole idea of is that it is actually predict expectation or
your internet's
you're cutting out, man.
Your internet's dying on us. Well, okay, so
it's cutting out.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to parse out real quick.
Okay, let me give you I have this. I am aware of a book called The Lobsterist. Now, this book, if you read it, is rather silly, but it makes grandiose claims about how things work and why they work. And it also makes other claims as well. Now, you've never read The Lobsterist, I would assume. So anything I say about The Lobsterist is something that you wouldn't be able to believe or disbelieve necessarily. You would maybe grant me the benefit of doubt and believe that I'm being honest about what the book says. But without reading it, you can't really dismiss it and say, well, that's not true, or that's a good idea, or that's a bad idea. You couldn't really say anything about it because you haven't looked at it yet, right?
Well, yeah, anything I haven't heard of or conceived prior to you bringing it up, I don't make a positive claim for or against it.
Right. And that's what I'm trying to say in regards to this, to the nebulous God versus a Pacific God, because you have the universal word versus a particular word. A particular I can say yes or no to, but a universal, well, because anyone can say it's anything, that's a problem. Now, some words are like that. Some words are pretty ambiguous, but those words tend to not exist except in the mind. Now, maybe you'd find one that does and make me go back on that statement. So I'm being careful. But like the heap of sand paradox, like you take one little grain off, it's still a heap of sand. You keep doing that, it's still a heap of sand. It's like, when does it stop becoming a heap? Well, you can't really say because heap is nebulous. It's not really a thing. But a pebble is defined as being a rock of a certain size, and if it's not that size, then it's not a pebble, and that's the end of that. So until there was a hard and fast agreed upon definition of God, it's a problem to just say, well, I don't want to talk about Yahweh, let's just talk about God in general. Well, what do you mean? Well, actually, I want to talk about the Western version of God. Well, that's still a problem because you'd have to then demonstrate that this is the Western version of God, which he didn't do. But let's say you did do that and did show that it was a majority of people who thought that God was X. Great. Why do they think God is X? Well, because of this reason. And so you would get to the core reason why they think that God is the definition they're given. And that is what I'm after, is what is at the core of it. If it's just from the Bible, okay, well, then what are they doing to prove that the Bible is true, Or if this definition is coming from an argument, then great, present that argument. Because that's the third criteria that I offered. So I don't need to go down a rabbit hole of explaining why I require evidence, tests, or empirical evidence, I should clarify, test or a valid and sound argument. You just say, look, okay, that's what you require. You might have objections to that. Fair enough. I might go over those at a different time and place than here. I'm not really interested in doing that right now, but maybe at a different time I would be. But is if you don't have those, then what do you got? What could you have if you didn't have a valid and sound argument? At the very least, then my word, what do you have? Incoherent arguments? That's not very good. So, it just seems to me you would have one of those three things to offer for the thing that you're claiming is a thing in the first place. So just present me one of those things. Present me with the valid and sound argument. If you don't have that, then present me with the test or the empirical evidence. And if you don't have those, then just say, I don't have those. Great. Okay.
Well, here's the thing. It sounds like you've ruled out God by the third part, which is like if someone attempts to present an argument for God, right? That would be, and you would evaluate their argument. You would say, the way you're constructing this argument to argue for God does not follow logically. You haven't justified your premises and gotten to the conclusion logically and things like that. Well, so it sounds like any argument for God you've ever heard, that you would have to rule God out on the third category of your proof that you accept, right?
No, because every argument that I've read or heard so far has had one or more logical fallacies by the rules of logic, not because I didn't like the argument or didn't want to accept God or anything, just because that's the way that logic functions. I'm
not really saying that, like,
no, but I'm
not because you dislike it, but you've ruled God out because
because whatever it is, whatever X is, whatever the conclusion is, it could be anything. It doesn't matter. Whatever that conclusion is, the premises have to be without a fallacy. Now, as far as proving the premise, that is a different issue in and of itself that might be irrelevant as far as the argument goes. Sometimes it is. It depends on the argument. So every argument's going to be different. But the analysis is always consistent because the analysis is done within the rules of logic. So I do not know that it is impossible to give an argument for something in such a way that it proves it without empirical evidence or a repeatable test. I don't know that that's impossible. I just haven't seen it happen yet. So the third one is kind of a maybe somebody will be clever enough to do it. I don't know that they can. I don't know that they can't. But it's a third option, because I didn't want to just go with the first two, because I would be accused of scientism if I did. And I'm willing to go another step of saying, well, what about a logical argument? You got that? Because maybe somebody could construct something that would lead me to investigate the conclusion further. No one has yet, but that doesn't mean no one can.
Now, just real quick for the third category, let's say someone gave a general, well-known argument to try to argue for a theistic concept, like the cosmological argument. Everything that begins to exist as a cause, the universe began.
Yeah, I know that one. Yes.
Yeah. Now, I'm not arguing from that perspective. What I'm doing is I'm just bringing up that point as a particular argument theists would use to argue for a theistic God concept. Now, let's say that you object to the presentation in some capacity. One of the premises is wrong. You know, one of the assertions made in the argument is unjustified. Whatever the case, the argument that they would use to try to argue for a theistic God, you would say, well, I would object to these arguments because of these invalid premises. So, are you not actually objecting to God in the sense that they haven't justified God?
I don't honestly know if I can answer the question, because it doesn't matter what the thing is. Again, it doesn't matter what the conclusion is. If the argument is flawed, then whatever the conclusion is, it is one that I must, and we, if we care about logic, must be skeptical of. That doesn't make it false, by the way. It doesn't make it true either. It just means we're going to doubt it until a better argument is given, or until something else is given that would make us think that the conclusion was correct.
Well, that's the thing. That's what we do generally in a lot of things anyway. Like, a lot of people would rule out aliens because they have no good reason to believe they exist. Like, they would think whatever presented evidence is, like, some people have, you know, presented sort of fragments and things like this to say, oh, this is evidence of aliens. And
yeah, aliens.
People would say that, like, no, that's not good enough.
Visiting the Earth, I assume you mean, in that sense. Yeah.
Say what?
Aliens that have visited Earth, right?
Yeah, allegedly. Yeah.
Allegedly, right? Yeah. Well, if you know, I mean, because, you know, you'd simply, because it's a big burden of proof. Yeah, you'd have to have something that was a lot of proof. You'd have, you know, it'd be helpful if we just saw the UFO, the flying saucer or whatever in the sky, because it would be all over the news. So, you know, well, but they're invisible. It's like, okay, now we're, you know, come on, you know, I mean, you know.
Yeah, so basically, they're ruling them out, not to say that they don't exist, but they have no good reason to believe they do exist, given the fact that the presented evidence has been too weak to justify them.
Right.
That's how they rule them out.
Essentially, yes. That yes, it could be that there's aliens, but as far as them visiting us, the evidence of them doing that is insufficient to warrant that conclusion to be the case.
Right. So basically, what I'm getting at is, do we rule out things by the fact that they're not justified? We don't rule them out because we're saying they don't exist. We rule them out in the sense that, you know, the evidence that we try to use to justify them, you know, hasn't stacked up to any solid conclusions. So we justify them on that framework. So would you say that would you rule God out in the sense that God has not been justified to you?
In the same way that the alien thing, yeah, I think that would be a fair way to compare it. Although with the aliens, there we have an idea of what that would be like, because we know humans. So if we just pretended that humans evolved on Mars and came and saw us, then we have some sort of idea to base the acceptance or rejection on. And I don't know that we have the same parallel for God, but so to some degree the analogy works, but to some degree it doesn't.
See, the only contention I would have to that is we have a perception of what we would imagine aliens would be if they existed, that they would in some way, shape, or form look like organic type creatures. They would be sentient agents and things like that. They would have a similar type of form, but different in many different ways. Like humans have like specified points in the pupils of their eyes. Like aliens in our perceptions have like dark black pupils all around, if you will.
Right. It's a very common face that you see with the alien face, because that's actually, well, there's a reason why people see that. But at any rate, yeah, that it would probably look nothing like we would expect it to look. Who knows? And of course, the question of whether we would even know it was an alien or not, like it was like, it's so different than us that we don't even recognize it being alive. Who knows? I don't know. But, yeah, we have something to go on to some extent. But with God, this nebulous God, the universal God versus Yahweh or Shiva, I had to pull one out of Hinduism there. A particular God is easier to talk about than a universal one, because the universal one's there's too much room to play with, and so it's like, we need to concrete that in something. We need to show that it's even possible to be a thing, and that work hasn't been done as far as I know. Maybe somebody's done it and I just don't know. That's always possible. So what do you got? Do you have one of the,
Well, I would imagine about a variety of conceptions of the God concept. I mean, some gods are defined to be, creatures that are like us, like Thor, for example.
Yeah.
Like they look like human creatures. They're just sort of, human-looking entities with a lot more power than we do. And then in other concepts of God, you had the one that the gentleman here presented you with earlier. He said it was a disembodied mind, an eternal, existent personal entity which can effectuate the initial conditions of the universe. So you have a number of concepts of God to look at.
The concept is certainly there, but what's lacking is the evidence to show that the concept is, rather than it's just an idea. Well, okay, great, it's an idea, but why other than it being an idea, what would prove the idea? Let's just skip to the part where it's proven to be a thing. It's interesting as an idea, maybe, but so are any number of ideas. And unless we can show that it's a thing, then it probably only exists in the mind. Now, it might exist otherwhere besides the mind, but for now, that seems the most reasonable place to put it. The idea that a mind can exist without a brain, for example, I've never seen anything like that. Never, not one example of that. So show me that, because what would that look like? I don't even know.
Well, if you want to give evidence for any particular thing, would you not agree that you have to have an idea of what the evidence relates to? And what I mean by that is this. Let's say someone you're talking to has never known what the concept of water or wetness is, and then you tell them it's raining outside. And then they say, well, no, it's not. And then you come to find out that they don't even know what rain is, water is, what wetness is, or any of that. How could they object that it's raining outside if they don't even know what water or wetness or anything like that is? Well, how could they object to that if they don't even know what those concepts are?
But we already covered earlier that, yes, you, in a sense, do have to object when you don't know what the thing is, because I said the Lobsterist book, there's nothing I could say about it until you've read it that you could object to or not. You would have to kind of, in a way, object to it because you haven't looked at it. You haven't read it. And once you did, you would be like, oh, come on, this part's ridiculous. Okay, that part's true. This part, whatever. And so there'd be multiple things to object to or agree with. And it's not just a straightforward, well, it's all bull. Some of it's true. Some of it's not true. A lot of it's, but, well, unless you're a lobsterist, then it's all true. But you can't really, until you've read it, and I've given you no reason to spend your time and energy to read it, until you've read it, you don't have any idea. So until I give you a reason to read it, you're not going to read it. So
I think it's this, why would you say that this is not water or rain or wetness or anything like that?
If they don't, if they might have a different word or idea about it, who knows, because we're talking about language, but at least there we still have their water to go, this is water, and point to the dang thing and say, see that? That's water.
Well, so you basically tell me that you will have to explain to them what the concept is.
Yeah.
But them rejecting it outright before they even know what the concept is would be irrational, wouldn't it?
No, because you already agreed that earlier that you would have to, in a sense, say no to whatever the lobsterist might say. Because if I said everything in the lobsterist is true, that's an assertion I've made. The burden's on me to prove that. You haven't even read it, nor would you spend time or energy doing so unless I gave you a reason to do it. Maybe you would do it for fun and say, "Here's the lobsterist," and you'd be like, "Okay, I'll waste some time. Whatever. Who cares?"
Well, in that particular example, I didn't object to it because number one, I was presented the concept for the first time, and number two, I wouldn't even reject it or accept it before it was explained to me what it was, and then I could go forth to evaluate it from there.
Right. So
that would be just as irrational. See, you notice that I didn't accept it or reject it.
Yeah,
but the person in the rain example I gave, they did reject it before they even knew anything about the concept.
Okay, I think I see what you're getting at, and I would say, well, I'm being skeptical of it, which it's neither an acceptance nor a rejection. It's just doubt. I doubt it both ways. I can neither accept it nor can I reject it. It's like when people say I neither affirm nor deny that I did that. They're saying they're not giving an answer. They're giving an answer that says neither. It's like, did you kill him or not? The answer is neither of those. I'm not going to answer the question. That's the answer. It's kind of one of those where it's not an acceptance, it's not a rejection, it's neither. It's just I doubt it. I'm skeptical of it. That's it. That's the best I can do. And so then that's my position. Okay.
So here's my question. So if you initially have nothing to go on, then how would you know that it would be possible for the presentation of this thing that this other person believes in to fall into one of these three categories?
If it doesn't fall into one of those three categories, they'd have to come up with a category that is coherent in some way or shape or form that I could accept. No one's done that. So if it doesn't fall within those three categories, I'm just not interested in it.
Well, I mean, that's a different question, though. If you're not interested in it, then that's one thing.
No, but I'm just saying, if it doesn't have empirical evidence or a repeatable test or a valid and sound argument for it, not only am I not interested in it, but nobody, well, I guess other than as a hobby, we should be skeptical of it, because what would you have? If you didn't have a valid and sound argument, then you must have what? An incoherent argument. Mm-hmm. Or if you don't have a test, then how do you know it's anything at all? If you don't have empirical evidence, you can't even point to it. So what do you have? You have absolutely nothing other than speculation, a guess, faith. Not good enough.
So the third category would be, as the gentleman explained earlier, that we're giving you a framework to work with. Like the concept of God that he presented was an unembodied or disembodied mind.
Show me that that's a thing.
What's that?
And then show me that that's a thing. Give me an argument or a test or empirical evidence that a disembodied mind is a thing.
Well, here's the thing. If this disembodied mind is the absolute paradigm of everything, how in the world would you be able to give evidence of something that is absolute in nature?
I don't know.
What do you mean by absolute there?
Basically, it's nothing comes before it and everything else is dependent upon it.
But how would you know
what kind of dependency are you talking about?
Yeah.
Well, just take any, I don't know. Just
what you're asking, though, in my view, is I've presented you with this idea that cannot be affirmed in a meaningful way, but also can't be denied because because I said so. I have defined this thing into existence. That's not how it works. That's not how logic functions. That's not how reality functions. I could substitute any word for it and say, well, it's fairies, it's magic, it's time travelers, it's any number of claims I wanted to make, and it would be just as unsound because I'm removing it from the framework of explaining what it is. So explain what a disembodied mind is, how it works, and give me an example of it. If you can't do that with empirical evidence or repeatable test, okay, how about a valid and sound argument? Do you have that? No. If you don't, then that's it. We're done. Then we have to be skeptical of it because it's not something that you've shown to be. It's that simple.
Well, when you define what the properties are,
but you don't know that those are the properties. That's what I'm saying is you have to not just define it, because I could define that I have $1 million. That doesn't make me have $1 million. I wish it worked that way. I really do. But if I could use definitions to make things real, I would just say the definition of $1 million is that I have $1 million. So boom, I have $1 million. No, it doesn't work like that. So it doesn't matter how I define any given word or how you or how anyone does. The question is how we go about demonstrating that the definition is in fact rooted in reality rather than it's just an idea in our brain that we made up.
Well, here's the thing. If you're gonna approach like taking particular descriptions and giving a definition of what we're talking about, then you would have to do that with everything. You would have to say that you couldn't do it with aliens. You had to do it with a lot of people.
I do. These three things that I do require for everything.
You do require that for every. Do you require it for I don't know, empiricism itself?
Yeah, if I was an empiricist, which I'm not, but yes, I would.
So, your criteria is empiricism, but you don't apply the same rules to empiricism itself.
No, I didn't say that my criterion is empiricism because I think that including logic in there includes another factor that empiricists might not necessarily include. But I could be wrong. I don't really care about the labels per se. But I apply my system to everything, including itself. But that's irrelevant to anything else. But yes, it's true. I apply this system and criteria to all claims, no matter what they are.
Well, do you take empirical domains as an axiom?
I don't know. I don't know what you mean there.
Like, you don't use empiricism to justify empiricism. You just sort of take it as an axiomatic starting point.
Well, the empirical evidence is one of the three things. But it's not the whole. So, no.
Well, what I'm getting at is when you assess the three categories you want to put it in, do you evaluate empiricism the same way? Like when you say you would have to have like empirical evidence for God, for example. Do you have empirical evidence of empiricism itself?
Well, again, I don't know that I'm using pure empiricism per se, but I would apply a repeatable test to empiricism to verify that it works. So see that I would use the second requirement on the first. So empirical evidence, I could use a repeatable test upon the empirical evidence to verify that it is actually the thing that I'm wondering about. And if that failed, then I'd have to go to the valid and sound argument. And if that failed, then something went wrong somewhere, and I have to recheck everything. And I've run that a couple of times through my own system. I've applied it to itself, and it works. It still works. Logic still functions. So I'm pretty happy with the system I've come up with. So then the question is, do you have empirical evidence, repeatable test, or a valid and sound argument for whatever the thing is, whatever the claim is? And if the answer is no, then that's the end of the story. And I have to be, and we all have to be skeptical of it. Unless you don't care about logic, then you don't have to be skeptical of it.
Well,
Or
I think that's the problem,
unless
though,
you're
that
willing to admit that it's just faith. If you're willing to admit it's just faith, then that's fine too.
Well, I think that's the problem, though, is because like when you use empiricism as
But
one
I'm
of
only
your
using that for the first one, not the other two.
right. But
Yeah.
if we take these one at a time, let's start with empiricism.
But they're
If you use
not.
that,
They're all three are operating simultaneously.
they're operating simultaneously.
Yeah, because I only need one of the three. I don't need all three. I can only
here's the
any
thing.
of them would be fine. So do you have that? Yes or no?
Well, hold on. If they're operating simultaneously, then why do you separate them into three categories?
Because they are three categories. You could have one. Potentially, you could have one without the other. I don't think that you would necessarily, but hypothetically, maybe somebody only knows for one of them and not the others. So again, the question is, do you have any of those for what your claim is?
But hold on, no? that flies.
Answer the question. No,
dude, that is totally contradictory.
Answer
you contradicted yourself.
No, I
because
didn't.
now you said all three of these things are simultaneous.
They are.
But earlier you said, like the first category, empiricism.
Look, you can have things working at the same time that are still separate. You know that, right? Like I could have 3 different computers running 3 different programs at the same time. That's basically how I'm looking at this. Okay. So,
but that's not the issue. That's not the issue here.
You can take each one on its own and go, okay, well, let's go with empirical evidence. Well, can you imply empirical evidence to empirical evidence? You might not be able to. That's why you have repeatable tests. So you go on to that one. So if the answer is no, okay, it's no. Okay, I can't apply empirical evidence to empirical evidence. No, I cannot.
But when you talk about, but hold on. But you said. But you said that these things operate simultaneously. If they operate simultaneously, then why in the world are you sectioning off one thing when you say, okay, you're not going to be a total empiricist, so you move to the next thing?
Because I'm more
Why
nuanced.
do you section them off if they work?
Because I'm trying to clarify that I'm giving some wiggle room for the person that makes the claim to play with. Okay, the problem is. Presented with the question of, is there empirical evidence for your claim, whatever that is in here, I'm assuming it's God, is the answer you do or do not have empirical evidence for this thing? Yes or no? Do you have empirical evidence for it?
But here's the problem.
Not that there's a problem, just yes or no. That's all.
But it's a problem, though, man, because if they work
there's not a problem.
Hold on, man. You're not getting this.
Isn't empirical evidence for it.
You're not getting this. If they work simultaneously, then if I give like an argument, which is a third category, I will have to have empirical evidence right along with it. If they work simultaneously,
I don't see that. I've already clarified. I don't know. I've never seen it happen that somebody had a valid and sound argument for a thing that lacked empirical evidence and or a repeatable test. But that doesn't mean that could not happen because somebody might be able to do it. I don't have any idea. I'm willing to let that be a possibility so that a person has another category to which they could prove me or at least give me a reason to investigate further into the conclusion that they have.
I'm sorry, man. I promise you I'm really not running, but I got to take care of a really important phone call. Hopefully we can talk about this some other time.
Yeah, you take care and best to you and yours and everything, and keep learning and growing and all that. And may the lobster be with you.
All right. Yeah, that's a nice little joke, but that was a great conversation, man. Great talking with you. How you doing?
Okay, I missed everything that happened in chat. Did anything happen in? There's the stuff that happened in chat. So everything that was said in chat that was wrong was wrong. I don't know what to respond to. Anybody have questions for me? Let's see. He had to leave. I'm a big nerd. I agree. Doesn't negate my arguments. Main gun. We can't say X does Y until X has been demonstrated. Exactly. Oh my God. So many things were said. I don't even know what to respond to anymore. Okay. I'll leave this to Carol then. Or what did he say to call him? Now I don't remember now.
Jack.
Jack. There you go. I knew. I was like, yeah, I knew that was it. I just no, I didn't. Okay, Jack. What's on your mind? What do you want to say here? Nothing.
I don't have anything.
You got nothing? That's all right. So I'm guessing that Jack, you might be a skeptic or something of that label. I don't know if you even want a label or have a label.
Yeah, I'm an atheist.
Oh man, such a burden to bear. Other than that, what you got? What do you know what ethical system you have, or do you have any idea?
I don't really have an ethical system.
Well, you do. You probably just don't know the name of it, because there's several out there. I usually give a list of it, but I'd have to dig up the list again. But yeah, I find that interesting. Are you into that sort of stuff, or are you more into the science stuff, or what is it that gets you going?
Yeah, I'm interested in philosophy.
What the philosophy is kind of like, the why or the how kind of question, or the philosophy as far as like, can we know anything at all sort of philosophy? Which one, or all of it?
I guess all of that.
All right. So do you have you ever done the whole, is reality real thing? Oh.
Sorry, can you say that again?
I said, have you ever questioned reality? Like, well, reality could just be, the Matrix or the holodeck or whatever.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's not that. Yeah, that's kind of where I go with it. It's like, yeah, but it's not. It's like reality is real. Screw it. Do you have a deconversion story, or you've always been an atheist?
I mean, it's not much of a story. I just sort of stopped believing when I was like 10 or 11 years old.
How'd that go down?
I mean, I think what I thought at that time was that religious belief wasn't consistent with science.
That seems pretty reasonable, boy. You was it because you were learning stuff in school that got you there, or was it that evil school system's fault?
I mean, I was interested in science, and I think it just became clear to me at some point that religious beliefs didn't really fit with.
Do you think science. That if we had an answer for what happened before the before, if we had the ultimate answer of the universe, let's say, and we said the answer is, 42, do you think that theists would accept that, or do you think that they just put God before that anyways?
Well, I assume they would say that God is something more fundamental than any.
Yeah, it's kind of the definition we were given, is that God equals reality. And how do I prove reality? You point to reality and go, there you go. And I go, yeah, but it already has a name, reality. So you don't need to add God to it. Because it's, the disembodied mind thing, there was another thing, was like, how would that work? Because minds required neural pathways. So you'd have to have something like a neural network, but maybe it was pure energy. But then you would still have the energy. So that's still a physical thing. And they want to remove God from, well, some theology wants to remove God from the physical realm. And then you're like, well, now what are you even talking about now? Because if it's not physical, what is it? Like, well, it's non-physical. But yeah, but what does that mean? Like, How? What? So yeah, God exists outside of space and time, right? Nowhere. That's where so it doesn't exist. Got it. Okay. Yeah, the definition argument that you could define a god-eating bunny as a bunny that eats all other gods, and then so that's the god that exists, and then it eats itself because that's what it has to do. And there you go, you've defined something into existence. And that's what I was saying, is that the definition alone of the idea isn't sufficient to allow us to say, okay, well, it's like, well, a ghost could open a door because we've defined that a ghost can open a door. But what's a ghost? It's a thing that can open a door. But okay, you're right back where you started. The thing with the circular, do you think that circular is always valid? That hinted of precept, so I wasn't going to answer that. But yes, circular arguments are always valid. There are arguments, however, that appear to be circular to the untrained eye, but are actually tautologies or axioms, and people often will cite those as being circular when they're not. Okay, so fish head salad left. Main gun said some stuff. Let's see. Jip person said, if God really exists, he has humor because Christians created to think that speak his case always pure, incredibly laughable. Well, no, I think that God would have to have a good sense of humor because he put the entertainment park next to the sewage park. So that's pretty funny. A lot of people, I'm an anti-realist on science. What the hell does that mean? What does that mean? Oh, well. All right. Well, do you want to say anything before I end this insanity finally?
No, that's fine.
All right. Okay. Well, guys, gals, robots, etc. out there, I think I've run my course. I answered question that no atheist could answer, and then things happened, and I might have been rude to that guy. I don't know. You guys tell me if you think I was rude or was fine. It was interesting. With the other people, I had no problem with them, but he was interrupting me. Like, I would try to be like, no, look, you keep saying I believe this or that. I don't. I just, because I object to that word. So I was like clarifying myself, and he'd be like, oh, you're interrupting me. I was like, yeah, you're going on for like hours at a time. And of course, he had William Lane Craig as his avatar. So that kind of pretty much shows where, anyways. Now, you said, hold on, Carol, you said, or Jack, you said you knew that this person was somebody else?
Yeah, his name is Darwin's Deity or Darth Dawkins. And there's a YouTube channel devoted to him called Darwin's Greatest Hits.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard of this. I'm pretty sure I've seen that person. Darwin's Greatest Hits. Yeah. A conversation with Darwin's Deity. So why didn't he just go with Darwin's Deity as his avatar name on here?
I'm not entirely sure. I think maybe he is worried about getting doxxed. And
I'm very much against doxing. I think it's horrible and evil, and nobody should do it.
Yeah.
So Steve McRae had him. This guy came in and ruined their hangout 2 years ago. So yeah, this guy is not very fun. Okay. All right. Okay, everybody. That's it for real this time. I guess I'll put the Lobsterist in chat if anyone actually wants to read it, because it is true. It says it's true in the book. So I mean, come on. All right. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye. Later. Have a good one, folks. Finn. I'll put Finn in the thing. Here we go. And stop broadcasting.